Guys, this video was recommended to me by a viewer. It looked very interesting simply because this man is clearly a disgruntled World of Warcraft player. This is your average WoW enjoyer that constantly waits for Blizzard to drop Classic Plus. I know, because I'm just like him. Now, this video is pretty much on the longer side, but I don't really care. I love World of Warcraft, and I want to see some people take a dunk on Blizzard.
Are Blizzard totally fucking lost? Because when I started playing this game, I used to power walk home from school, taking every little dodgy shortcut possible just to get back to my laptop and level my Drano Paladin just that little bit sooner. I was desperate to hit level 58 so I could finally get to Outland. The mystery of it absolutely enthralled me, just seeing that giant unexplored landmass on the map with the, the jagged edges around Blade Edge Mountains made it seem very dangerous and alien. And I genuinely wonder sometimes, do Blizzard still understand what made my 13-year-old self climb over crumbling dry stone walls and sneak behind an old people's home just to shave off 2 minutes of my journey home?
No,
Very significant
they
alleyway
don't.
in my life. Because this is where I got my first ever snog. Emerald Grinnell in year 8.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Because I've spent the
Man,
last...
I really wish I was there for the glory days of World of Warcraft, because I started playing Classic whenever they re-released it. So, it really just makes me think, how would I have felt if I played it back in the day? But also, it gives me a really good point of, I don't have any nostalgia towards it, so whenever I review the game and I say that it is the best MMO out there, I can genuinely say it without feeling like nostalgia pilled. And no one can use the nostalgia argument on me. So that's kind of the good part. But I really wished I played it back in the day. Unfortunately for me, my parents thought that putting their credit card information online would immediately get it stolen, which ironically is pretty much truer today than it was before.
2 months thinking about this and writing this video, while also simultaneously pretending to be a mechanic. Fuck. And unsuccessfully trying to train a lunatic cochlear puppy. Paw. Paw. Go on. Good boy. He's a good boy. What's up, peanut butter?
That's a good boy.
Obviously, as a content creator, you end up speaking to a ridiculous amount of people about World of Warcraft for countless hours.
I'll move my camera.
I've been to conventions
I think
and
he's
met
going to
fellow
be
Stockholm Syndrome suffering weirdos who've been playing this game for nearly 2 decades. I've met hardcore classic WoW
Okay, never mind,
with
he moved
such a
again.
severe masochist complex they prefer to actually play patch 1.0 vanilla, where mages actually have to manually craft their own self-respect. I've met catgirl players who only play Hunter and spend 14 hours a day collecting battle pets and mounts. And I've met people who haven't even touched an official Blizzard server since Wrath of the Lich King and still exclusively live inside private servers. There are so many different kind of WoW players out there with completely different expectations of what the game should actually be. And sometimes I genuinely sit there wondering, realistically, how the fuck are Blizzard even supposed to please this player base when the community is more divided than a kindergarten sandpit? So have Blizzard genuinely lost direction, or have they simply evolved the game to satisfy the majority of people who still consistently pay that subscription? Because the mindset of the average WoW player has changed dramatically since Mankirk's wife got, well, let's be honest, she got what she fucking deserved. First, we're going to look at the mechanical experience of...
Also, no, the player base didn't really change. It's Blizzard trying to force change upon it. They're clearly trying to make sure their audience is being modernized by, what we call Disneyfication, Fortnification, whatever, right? It doesn't really matter. The term is all the same meaning, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work, because World of Warcraft always appealed to young adults. It still does to this very day in a very odd fashion, and no matter how much Blizzard would try to pivot and change the core of World of Warcraft, it will never work. It'll never work. That's why so many people are disgruntled, why so many people are annoyed with Blizzard constantly leaning into a theme that doesn't fit Warcraft. God damn, they're so afraid to even say Warcraft.
The classic player attempting to return to retail because they're bored of killing the same 3 raid bosses for the 17th consecutive year. When a classic WoW player logs into retail, The first thing that usually happens is they get absolutely spammed by glowing yellow presents, rewards, and notifications that you have to click through just to remove that giant irritating thing on your screen. You know, you can't even use your microbar. And I've always found this weird. The idea of receiving rewards in a video game for not playing a video game. Because basic game design is very simple. You play the game, you overcome challenges, you get rewarded. And as you improve, invest more time, and overcome harder obstacles, the rewards become more meaningful. That's the core gameplay loop that makes video games so addictive in the first place. It's a cycle of tension, release, and then craving for more. Rewards motivate players because they represent progress, status, and achievement. And psychologically, the dopamine spike is actually strongest not when you receive the reward, but just before your brain believes you're very likely to get it. That anticipation is what makes progression systems so satisfying. Now, obviously, Retail WoW still has these systems in place, otherwise nobody would play the game, but the rewards are handed out too easily. Or worse, for doing absolutely nothing, for not even being logged into the game. The whole thing starts feeling tacky and emotionally weightless, especially when half the rewards are basically, congratulations on paying your subscription 6 months in advance. Here's a dragon. Remember when you didn't need an incentive to pay for the game subscription because the pleasure of playing the game was enough? And to be fair, not every reward should require 400 hours of psychological warfare and carpal tunnel. These systems do encourage long-term engagement, and casual players make up a huge portion of the MMO player base. They are important. Blizzard obviously wants players to keep returning for new expansions instead of collapsing into a depressed...
Why is she bald? What is that? Who is that? So weird. Wait, we have captions? No. Okay, Adam, like, what in God's name is that? Is that real? Is that inside of World of Warcraft? I haven't encountered that. And thank God.
...spiral after every raid tier. Not everyone wants punishing grinds just to get an exciting mount reward. And realistically, an MMO does... Who the fuck
she
is
has
texting
Ligma?
Right
Oh, okay, I see.
MMOs do need casual players, obviously, to keep the world
I heard Ninja had that.
Alive. But whenever I think about mounts, I always remember finally hitting level 30.
Is it too loud?
Getting onto my fat, ugly, plain Jane, apprentice-riding LEG mount, which coincidentally also describes many of my ex-girlfriends. And yes, it was actually level 30 for me because although I did technically play the game during vanilla, Wrath was when I actually finally got my own laptop, so my first proper endgame character was actually a Draenei Paladin, so judge me all you want, I generally couldn't give a rat's ass about that. The point is that getting a mount used to mean something genuinely special. It was a reward for actually adventuring through Azeroth, reading quests to figure out where the fuck every quillbot and handful of oats for some depressed horse was. Until you finally...
Yeah, not only mount was, like, so good to achieve and it felt important, it was so satisfying because you didn't really need that until you had it. And, it was such a crazy jump from walking all the way, especially if you're playing Alliance and you're doing the Wetlands run, which, I don't care, I'll do it like 700 times on different ults. I really just love that run. But if you made that run... and then you get a mount, brother, it feels like the best thing in the world. And it's not mandatory, it's just very, very good upgrade for your character. So the delayed gratification just hits you like a truck. Nowadays, not only you get a mount at the very start of the game, it is mandatory. If you play the new expansion like I have right now, I literally played the last 2 days in retail because, you know, I'm trying to level up to max level and then I want to hit like mythic dungeons and do the raiding and stuff to get some more information. Never mind that. Like, if you played retail WoW, you know that you cannot play the game without a flying mount. You don't walk on the ground. The map is massive. It is vastly empty. There is no one around. All you do is ride your dragon and that's it. You don't see anyone, not in the skies, not on the ground. There is no reason to play the game like a human being anymore. You're essentially just hovering from place to place without any real interaction. All you talk with is World of Warcraft NPCs. And you know what? It may be a better experience other than the real players. Because the real players, they're the true NPCs nowadays.
Reach the level required to earn that rite of passage. You were basically just a peasant jogging around in your farmer's boots. Then suddenly you got onto your mount and felt like a knight from Warcraft 3, cruising around in your glorious budget Pinto. Progress used to feel earned. Power progression was slower, more visible, and actually meaningful. In modern MMOs, progression is often massively accelerated, diluted, and weirdly disconnected from effort. Rewards
I think
feel
that
constant,
that's Throne and Liberty,
automatic,
I think.
and honestly, a bit manufactured now. It's like the game has an internal panic alarm that goes, warning, warning, player has not received a reward in 11 minutes. They might quit the game. Deploy green item. And because of that,
and for that reason, I always hated Eastern MMOs. Literally, that is the exact reason for why I never played an Eastern MMO. I hate this incessant feeling of, oh, we need to give the player something, otherwise he's going to quit. Like, if World of Warcraft actually taught us anything, is that this couldn't have been further away from the case. Like, people need to wait. They need that lull between dopamine hits, because it's just going to make it hit even harder. Whenever you constantly rely on quick and short dopamine hits, you're gonna end up with TikTok brain. It's not healthy for you. There's a reason for why they want to ban that, right? You know, it just... What are we doing here? Like, people figured it out back in the day. That's not how the human mind works. We're not built for short-term, like, dopamine hits. We're not built for that. And again, companies don't care because all they want is to make sure that you build up an addiction. And for some reason, it actually works. And it sucks because people cannot quit World of Warcraft. I assume not only because of that, there are like plenty of factors, obviously like sunken cost fallacy, etc. We're not going to go through all of that, but we really need to stop with that garbage. We truly have to stop with it because gear means nothing. I constantly swap my gear in retail WoW. Literally, like every 5 minutes I get a new piece. And you get new mounts, you get new toys, every achievement on Earth. Nobody cares. I hate pop-ups. Whenever I start a new MMO and I immediately get a pop-up, I just quit. The thing I loved about Classic WoW the most was the fact that you just being thrown into the world and it's like, yeah, take care, kid. Have a good one. And that's it. Nothing is being explained to you. No hand-holding whatsoever. And that's it. It was good. It was perfect. That's how it should be.
Rewards stop feeling memorable. Whenever a classic player returns to retail and sees somebody on a mount, the immediate assumption is usually just, yeah, it's probably a store mount. And the harsh reality is you often don't care anymore because mounts no longer carry the same sense of status or presence that they used to. It could genuinely be a 0.1% drop chance mount from the final boss of a mythic raid, but because there are now 17 trillion mounts obtained from 50 million different activities, including fishing, pet battling, archaeology, and probably filing your taxes correctly, the emotional impact gets diluted. But this is where the...
Wait, what do we have here? We have a chump, right? Dude, every single day you milk this WoW sucks, Blizzard sucks, always watching the same videos from other YouTubers that have nothing else to do or say. This is getting old already. Take your meds. Take your meds, brother. You need help. Not from me, from God. Like, by the way, in case you want to understand like why I do this, is because I want to actually make a change. I want Blizzard to change. And I really hate that trope of, oh, Blizzard will never change, so don't do anything about it. I think that is very dumb. We wanted Classic for, what, like a decade? We cried. We made Nostalgia's World of Warcraft popular in an insane amount. Blizzard paid attention. What we got? Classic. One of the best experiences of my entire life. And now, we about to get Classic Plus, with Turtle WoW being involved more than likely, and this is going to be good. So yeah, I know, it's very difficult to watch someone trying to make a change, and trying to talk about a serious problem, but if you want to watch some happy-go-lucky streamer that says, oh, Blizzard, you're the best, yes, give me more Xelatath feet, I love that. Then enjoy. This is not the place for you, homie. But first you need to take your meds.
Conversation gets more complicated because MMOs themselves are no longer the dominant genre they once were. Gaming has changed massively since 2004. Pacing has changed, player expectations have changed, and even the definition of what people consider fun in a video game has changed. I mean, my girlfriend is currently addicted to Tamagotchi Life, which is basically a game where you create these little people on an island, and you just sort of watch them vibe and chill and have emotional breakdowns. When I was 5 years old playing Spyro Year of the Dragon, I generally could not have imagined games evolving into something like that.
Oh, this was such a good game.
Blizzard clearly understands this shift. And Retail WoW was adopted by absorbing features and progression systems inspired by games like Animal Crossing, New Horizons, and Stardew Valley. That's why modern WoW is filled with collection systems, mounts, pets, transmog garrisons, and now finally player housing. It's all they talked about in the State of Azeroth thing. You know, these are alternative progression paths that appeal to different kinds of players. Blizzard doesn't want to lose players to changing consumer tastes, and to be fair, retail has successfully built a massive audience made up of very different archetypes of players, whereas Classic WoW basically just has two species of human. The guy who hates leveling and only raids, and the guy who likes leveling and raids sometimes. Your options for spending time in Classic WoW are pretty limited. Most of the alternative casual content usually boils down to self-radicalizing yourself on YouTube while watching alien conspiracy theories while farming some reputation nobody cares about anymore. You're probably running into this video thinking, oh, typical Classic WoW Andy YouTuber is just going to slate retail and it's going to be a classic versus retail and why classic is so much better kind of video. It's not going to be that kind of video, guys. Retail genuinely does offer more variety. World quests, delves, world bosses that don't just spawn once a week. Events, transmog collecting, mount farming, pets, and now finally player housing systems, like I said. There are simply more ways to exist in the game world. But should Blizzard actually be doing this? Or does Retail WoW sometimes just feel like a game desperately panic implementing systems to retain players instead of simply refining the incredibly strong MMO foundation they arguably already perfected around about the time of Wrath of the Lich King? The music genres that actually sell the most concert tickets are still, ironically labelled, alternative genres like rock and metal, and it's going up and up. And yes, those genres have evolved and experimented massively over the years. Some personal favourites of mine would be Bad Omens and Linkin Park. Bad Omens have blended more pop influences into their sound, and Linkin Park, obviously, as you know, have always mixed rap and electronic elements into, you know, their metal sound years ago. But the important part is that underneath all of it, they still fundamentally felt like rock and metal bands. Their experimentation enhanced the original flavour instead of replacing it. It's like lightly seasoning a steak with salt and pepper and maybe adding one decent sauce with about 3 ingredients instead of pouring molten cheese and strawberry yogurt all over the entire thing like an absolute psychopath. The identity of a genre still remained intact. But this is the big question of Retail WoW, and to be honest, most MMOs. Do MMOs still fundamentally feel like MMOs anymore? Now,
no, because big companies are trying to change the formula, and they're trying to change the formula in a way that makes you the most addicted and most money-spending fiend ever. And for some reason, it works, because they first started with mobile games, they understood the potential, and then Fortnite came out, and I think it just changed the entire landscape. Now every single company is trying to make MMO a live service game. That's why World of Warcraft is now being acting more like Diablo rather than a traditional MMO. It's very, very cyclical. You always do the same thing. Like monthly resets and all that stuff. And it's just the same loop over and over again. There is no point in playing retail World of Warcraft. You might as well just play PoE. I can't wait for WoW mixtape version, don't you? Soon. They just need the funding. Yeah, is he holding a blunt? I mean, this man, listen, you need it, okay? He playing WoW way too much. Like, his brain is gone. He needs to cope. That's okay.
I just want to be off the cuff for a second to be really direct with you.
He's obviously based, yeah.
World of Warcraft, or more specifically, pet battles are the first moment where WoW genuinely started feeling like Blizzard were panicking about player retention and losing confidence in their own games.
It's so garbage. It's such a trash system. They need to remove it. Either refine it or remove it. It's so basic. There is no reason for such a basic system to exist.
Own identity. Shouldn't have used the word own twice there. But anyway, because they literally just shoved Pokemon into World of Warcraft. It's an entire turn-based RPG system awkwardly crammed into an MMO, like somebody stuffing an unpeeled orange into a steak and ale pie, and then insisting it adds variety. It's always felt bizarrely out of place to me, and this was the first of many added systems that just felt totally out of place. Now, I admit this is an extremely tired Classic WoW Andy criticism at this point, but I do at least respect the fact Blizzard kept trying to create non-raiding endgame content every expansion instead of just relying entirely on raids and Mythic Plus forever. The weird thing is, though, almost none of these systems or new game modes actually stuck long term. And honestly, I think it's because most of them were just shit and uninspired, or just not executed very intelligently. Take scenarios in Mists of Pandaria as an example, okay? Playing vanilla Lord...
Take Mists of Pandaria as an example. That was very uninspiring. Well, it was inspired by Disney. But yeah, this was pretty much the point of World of Warcraft downfall. It wasn't the Cataclysm. It was Pandaria. You can clearly tell they had no idea what to do. And I don't care how much Throne of Thunder is appreciated. Like, the entire premise of this expansion shouldn't exist. Pandaria should have been, like, an add-on to a different expansion. It should have been, like, part of the game. I don't say, like, don't add it. But it shouldn't have been the entire focus. In my opinion, at the very least.
Lord of the Rings Online completely changed the way I think about World of Warcraft scenarios, which probably sounds like an incredibly strange sentence and a bit of a tangent, but hear me out, because it gives me another excuse to talk about my adventures and the Echoes of Angmar Lord of the Rings Online vanilla private server. But also, it is relevant, okay? So, Lord of the Rings Online had scenarios built naturally into the leveling experience all the way back in 2007. They weren't just an endgame queue content like Retail WoW did. Usually they would finish a major quest line.
Wait,
and the
what
quest
game
giver
is
would
this?
offer you a travel now option that launched you into a small instant story scenario connected directly to the area that you've just been questing through. I mean, sometimes it was a 2 to 3 player mission fighting through a bandit camp or a dwarven ruin. Sometimes it was a big 5-man instance, so basically a mini dungeon. Sometimes you defended a town against waves of enemies. Multi-stage progression, siege.
Damn, that's Lord of the Ring Online? Dude, it looks awesome. What? I've never played that before.
Assaulting orc strongholds or escorting key NPCs, and many other fun objectives. Sometimes it tied directly into the main narrative. The objectives constantly changed, and because they appeared naturally during leveling, they actually made the world feel more dynamic and alive, and you could follow the story way easier than you can in WoW. Unfortunately, this also meant you occasionally got gatekept from progressing.
Oh, it is Lord of the Rings Online.
Complete the scenario and progress the main quest line, which modern MMO players would probably cry about more than a gym bro
I never
finally
played that
accepting
before.
his girlfriend looks like a foot. Seriously though, is it just me, or do the biggest guys in the gym always have the most mongoloid, munter-looking girlfriends? I've always said that, you know, when a guy gets too big in the gym, it's because they're starting to develop a very unhealthy body dysmorphia complex to the point where they actually start to become less attractive to women and more to men. And at that point, you know, it's way smaller than you think, like the amount of muscle you need to develop in order to be, like, attractive to women. Like, the media and male gaze have brainwashed men into thinking they should look like Henry Cavill in Superman, when you should really aim to look more like Henry Cavill in The Immortals. But anyway, I'm supposed to be talking about World of Warcraft. The point is that Lord of the Rings Online scenarios were still...
I mean, nobody can really look like Henry Cavill in the first place, so I think that's the first hurdle.
Still a far better implementation of small-scale instant content because it enhanced the leveling journey itself instead of becoming another isolated gameplay feature abandoned after 2 weeks.
You could jump back then too. Damn, that's crazy.
Anyway, you know, Warfronts are another perfect
like crazy
example
programming.
of having a genuinely fantastic idea, then somehow managing to suck all the life out of it. The concept had massive potential, but because it was PvE only, it never actually felt like a battle. It felt more like a scripted theme park ride where everybody already knew the outcome before it even started. Why on earth was this not a PvP mode? While PvP in general just hasn't evolved properly at all, I think it's a huge reason why it's becoming an increasingly niche way to play the game. It still operates in what essentially the Halo 2 Xbox Live formula had: capture the flag, base control, and arena. And those modes were incredible in 2004, but gaming evolved, okay? You could release a perfect, like, modern remake of Halo 3 tomorrow with gorgeous graphics, and even
nobody would play that
IP like Star Wars on it, and it still wouldn't sell for shit.
Yeah.
It wouldn't touch the popularity of Counter-Strike, Valorant, or Overwatch, and it's because modern competitive games evolve the actual formula of what makes PvP engaging instead of just endlessly polishing the exact same systems for 20 years.
And that's completely fine. Like, PvP games have changed, PvE games have changed. That is incredibly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. In my opinion, MMOs are different on that regard because nobody really comes to an MMO for PvP. And I know some people in the chat will be like, oh, like, no, PvP is the best feature of an MMO. No, homie. There's a reason why every single PvP-based MMO crumbled. Like, there's a reason behind that. Because MMOs are being built off the backs of PvE Andes, okay? Like, I would say 90-something% of players are PvE enjoyers only, and some of them do PvP on the side, and that's it. Like, true hardcore MMO PvP players, they don't exist. They're an extremely loud minority, granted, but nobody is like them. Nobody.
It's a genuine shame, really, because the new battleground in the recent expansion, Slayer's Rise, honestly could have been a step in the right direction, but it feels a little bit too late now. Retail WoW now has so many spell effects and so many overlapping AoEs and so much visual clutter flying around the screen at basically all times.
I said it, they need to cut half of the abilities. It's just way too much, and it's all so useless garbage. They should separate, in my opinion, a perfect MMO would separate PvP from PvE completely. And not only that, when I say separation, I literally mean you have different abilities for PvP and different abilities for PvE. Like, I would literally go as far as same with gear. I would make PvP gear, PvE gear, so that way you'd have more agency on customization, because obviously when you build something for PvE, it's not going to be good for PvP, right? So when you're building something for PvP, you would like to have something more CC oriented rather than damage, because in raids, CC doesn't matter. You can CC the mobs. So it's way more beneficial to just completely separate between the two. And I'm not talking about different servers. I'm just saying inside of the same MMO, just make completely two different mods. When you go into a PvP zone, like it's everything shifts. Basically everything. And I would make separate gear. I would make everything different. I think that's the way to go about it. But most developers are lazy and they won't do that.
The game just generally doesn't feel properly optimized for large-scale PvP anymore, in the same way that other MMOs are. Half the time it feels like a fantasy battle. You know, it feels less like a fantasy battle and more like your graphics card is actively trying to compete with your central heating or some shit. So the end result is just a laggy visual mess, and most players already seem to fucking hate it. Which is unfortunate, because other MMOs have absolutely proven that large-scale PvP can still be massively entertaining. I've personally had great experiences in the big PvP battles in New World.
What the hell?
Guild
Dude,
Wars
that's
2,
Guild Wars.
Elder Scrolls Online, and even
What's going on?
Blade 2 Bannerlord and the Battlefield franchise have proven how fun it is when a game genuinely makes you feel like you're in a large-scale war. It's like a no-brainer that MMO should provide that, really, because realistically...
Oh, this is world versus world? That's crazy.
And the ironic thing is,
we need to try it.
already nailed this concept nearly 20 years ago with the original, and I mean the original, Alterac Valley. Most people don't actually remember the original AV anymore. They just remember the butchered modern version where both teams sprint directly past each other, rush towers, kill a boss in 6 minutes, and then leave without remembering a single thing that actually happened. Or even worse, the version that introduced reinforcements. You know, somehow they made the BG even more lifeless. What a lot of players didn't realise, don't realise, is just how much content and atmosphere was stripped out of the original AV over the years. Partly because most people never even experienced it properly back in vanilla, since a huge percentage of the player base weren't even level 60 yet. Well, actually need to be level 50, so yeah, and still most players weren't even level 50. The only reason I experienced the original version myself is because I played it later on the original Nost private server. And honestly, I was shocked by how much was actually going on in that battleground. It generally felt like Alterac Valley was what it was supposed to be. A huge chaotic high fantasy war between dwarves and orcs. You couldn't just rush objectives, because the mines, archers and embassy guards would absolutely fold you if you tried. So it actually kind of created lanes in the BG. You can probably see where I'm going with this. Massive fights formed in the middle of the map, and those battles would last for literal hours. You've heard all the stories that they, could last for days. The front lines constantly shifted. One moment the Horde were being pushed all the way back to their base, and an hour later the Alliance were desperately trying to, defeat their final boss. Looting enemy corpses actually mattered, because you could hand in the materials to strengthen your faction's NPC troops, and low-level players would often spend the battleground actually doing support objectives like summoning cavalry charges or bringing in bosses like Locholar, the Ice Lord, who would actually just one-shot people with frostbolts, which was pretty cool. I don't think people realise just how ahead of its time the original AV actually was. It was basically a primitive MOBA before MOBAs even existed.
No, MOBAs existed before that during Warcraft 3. But yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right about the fact that like massive battlegrounds were so revolutionary for the time, 100%. And the best thing about them is that they were in a confined space. So you could just queue for a BG and have the best time of your life rather than it happening to you in the middle of you wanting just to zone out and kill some kobolds. And that was the best thing about it. And I really think that we should return this. Because this is the way to go. Nowadays, everyone is about the mentality of 1v1 me, bro. And it just doesn't work inside of an MMORPG. MMORPGs are imbalanced by nature. You can never achieve a perfect balance inside of an MMO when it comes to PvP and classes. So the best way to kind of even that out is the rock, paper, scissors mechanic. And when you have 40 versus 40 or even less than that, it just tends to even out naturally. And I really did enjoy that. And I'm not a PvP gamer. You know that. I'm not a PvP gamer when it comes to MMO. Obviously, I play PvP a lot. Just not inside of an MMORPG. But it just worked. I actually enjoyed Alterac Valley a lot.
Had shifting lanes,
Yeah,
NPC and
I'm going to try World vs. World
summonable
eventually,
units,
obviously.
map control, resource turn-ins, and huge ongoing tug-of-war battles between two factions. AV was essentially a gigantic Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos custom game where every player controlled a single unit inside a larger war effort. And instead of evolving that concept, Blizzard just gutted it. Okay, which is insane to me because modders then went on to create the custom Warcraft 3 maps that eventually evolved into the MOBA genre, because it's kind of funny. Blizzard were accidentally sitting on one of the most large-scale PvP concepts they've ever made, and instead of expanding...
Wait, MOBAs happened after Classic WoW? It doesn't sound right. I don't think it doesn't sound right. Maybe I'm having my timelines confused. I guess you guys have to confirm it.
They reduced it into a glorified hallway speedrun. Now, I'm not saying that WoW should become a MOBA, but holy shit.
No, yeah,
its
so I think he's
PvP
confused.
could be so less dated and formulaic than it currently is. Blizzard generally seem lost when it comes to PvP design, and honestly, it's no surprise the PvP community keeps shrinking more and more every year. PvE has obviously always been the more important side of WoW, but even there, I do genuinely wonder, has the game really evolved that much beyond the same dungeon and raid treadmill every expansion? Does raiding always have to be the singular dominant form of competitive endgame PvE content, where all the best rewards come from, where there are so many other genuinely entertaining PvE formats that other developers are experimenting with successfully in other MMOs and other video games? These days you've got stuff like extraction systems, multi-stage objective missions, large-scale horde survival, escort missions, infiltration-style gameplay. These are all genuinely fun concepts that could evolve what MMO PvE actually could look like beyond walk into room, avoid
Yeah,
swirls
Dota was
and
way earlier, I know,
balls.
he
There's
confused me.
balls in retail. Kill boss, collect trousers. And loads of MMOs are generally trying this stuff, but the problem is they often just awkwardly copy and paste entire gameplay concepts from other genres instead of intelligently adapting them around the MMO's existing mechanics and identity. Again, lightly season the steak, keep the sauce separate, stop drowning the entire thing in tomato ketchup and melted cheese like you're cooking for a 7-year-old at a bowling alley birthday party, or any American. And this is where retail WoW starts feeling strange to me, because it often feels less like a better evolved version of World of Warcraft and more like a version of World of Warcraft with...
Bro, I heard people were actually eating spaghetti with ketchup. That's hearsay. I don't know, guys. Like, you shouldn't... even imagining it kind of hurts my feelings. I'm not gonna lie, that's such a huge disrespect to the Italians. Should never do that to yourself, guys.
A dramatically larger quantity of things to do, but many of those things feel less meaningful than the systems they've replaced. Do Blizzard still fully understand what makes an MMO feel like an MMO? Or are they deliberately trying to minimize parts of the MMO identity to attract people who are fundamentally... well, they don't even enjoy MMO-style gameplay in the first place?
We do it in Germany? Bro, like, don't do that. For the love of God, stop. I want to see you play a tank in WoW, to be honest. I am playing a tank right now. I'm just not showing it because nobody wants to watch me play retail. I've tried streaming World of Warcraft. Literally everyone left. I was like at, what, 30 viewers? And I went down to 14 after like 1 hour of game time. It's crazy how boring retail is to watch nowadays. It's just the same garbage all over again. Until you hit the late game where, okay, suddenly it becomes interesting. All I do is fly from zone to zone for hours on my goddamn ugly-ass dragon. And Like, I do nothing but take selfies with whelps. That's all I do. Literally, that's it. Like, oh, grab that, cool. Like, today, just a couple of hours ago, I did some quest, and I helped mushroom people fighting in arena. That's all I've done. Who wants to watch that? Who in his right mind would actually like to see that? So I'm waiting until I reach the interesting part of raiding and Mythic Plus, and then I'm going to start streaming it again. And even then, I might just make a video. I won't even stream it. I think it's a waste of space.
To be fair, there is another side to this argument. The average MMO player today is older than they were in 2004. Many people have jobs, relationships, responsibilities, children, mild depression, and lower back pain. So from Blizzard's perspective, it probably does make sense to streamline systems and make the game more accessible, because the core gameplay simply has... the core audience of the game simply has less free time than they used to. But then again, plenty of exhausted 38-year-old dad gamers somehow still manage to play both classic and retail simultaneously while raising 2 children and repairing decking in the garden every weekend. So I'm not entirely convinced time constraints alone explain everything. MMOs at their core are multiplayer games. Literally the name of the genre. The social and multiplayer aspect should logically be the primary focus, because that's the unique selling point that separates MMOs from basically every other kind of RPG. So it's always felt bizarre to me that many modern MMOs seem obsessed with removing the very social dependency that originally made the genre special in the first place. This is why modern MMOs increasingly push theme park style content and hyper convenient solo systems, instant queue content, silent groups, in and out gameplay loops where nobody communicates, and the whole experience of a dungeon finder feels like getting a ride in an Uber. And now
Facts. So facts. And I think he's specifically talking about delves in retail WoW. And don't get me wrong, I gotta admit, I'll be candid with y'all, I do really enjoy delves. They're a very fine addition to World of Warcraft. I do really enjoy them, but it's not World of Warcraft. It's just not. In my opinion, delves should be like an outside thing where you literally do not get gear from. All you get from it are certain cosmetics. In my opinion, that's what delves should be. I think they're really fun. I think they should stay. I think it's great you have an outlet for solo players, but you shouldn't get gear from it. Or experience from it. Maybe experience in the early levels, I don't really know. I think they should be their own focused roguelike game element inside of WoW, like Torghast should have been, and you know, it ended up being Torghast. And completely make it soloable and just have it, like, have player go at it at their spare time. But I think most of the focus should be on the social aspect of the game, 100%.
now you can literally queue into dungeons of NPC companions that basically play the game.
They are fun, they are fun.
And yes, I understand these systems exist to help new players learn dungeons without getting verbally abused, but I still think it's weird. The fact you can now complete, well, basically you can see the endgame MMO dungeon content with bots generally makes the whole game
it's
feel
insane. This part is
hollow to
crazy.
me.
But, you know, because you have no people playing the game. No new player would ever try out World of Warcraft ever again. The new player experience is so horrible. I can't even see how a new player would actually react to playing it. Now, I have a video queued up just on this very topic, so I'm not gonna go into detail because it looked very interesting. We're gonna watch it tomorrow, probably. Oh, jeez, what a voice crack. You see, Blizzard is making me voice crack.
Honestly, it gives me
Shame
a
on them. They want to silence me.
My hometown nightclub, which is actually an outright lie because, you know, I absolutely loved the Wheelhouse and Bonus, and unfortunately, it's just been shut down a few months ago. The nightclub is actually an interesting comparison now that I think about it. The Wheelhouse and Bonus was the true end of the night nightclub, okay? The final place still open, and simultaneously the last place on earth you actually wanted to be. Sticky floors, watered down drinks in plastic cups, and some bloke starting to fight.
Follower dungeons are non-issue. It's quite good because people can use it to try tanking and healing. This is classic player brain. I mean, wait, are you being like serious or sarcastic? I can't really tell, Barbuck. You really think that using bots for follower dungeons is like good? I can't really tell because in my opinion they're really horrendous. I think they're really bad, and I do understand like a true point of people of, oh, it can teach you the game, and I have no problem doing like dungeon with bots, but make it one dungeon, make it at the start of the game so people can grasp the basics and go back to train. But the rest, they shouldn't be like that. 100%. They shouldn't be like that. I do agree that, yeah, sometimes you're lacking players, but if the game is good enough, you'll find someone. And also, there's a reason to make dungeons repeatable, right? And I mean, Blizzard did really solid back in the day. Now we have a tank shortage issue, 100%. We have a healer shortage issue, 100%. But again, this is all manufactured by Blizzard. These problems can be easily solved, but all that Blizzard does is just nerf and balance and tune, and they don't realize that all of this is just band-aid solution. Nobody really cares about that. They're treating the symptom, not the disease. The disease are the player base, which they are currently cultivating. That is the problem. Wait, what? It literally does nothing to anybody, and you don't even get rewards. It's essentially just practice map. You can try new stuff out on it. I don't care. It just it completely how do you say that? Oh man, how do you say that? Like isolates the community. It shouldn't exist inside of an MMORPG. Never. You should always try to queue up with a group. I hate having these mechanics inside of an MMORPG. I literally don't care if you don't get any reward for him whatsoever. The fact that you isolate a potential player, it is really, really bad in my opinion. I tried playing retail for years, 3 times. I have bought a sub, and every single goddamn time I stopped after 2 to 3 weeks. You know what's good, Leonardo? It actually shows that you're a sane person. Kudos to you.
With a coat stand.
Well done.
To be fair,
you passed the test of sanity.
Played terrible music, but my hometown nightclub actually did have surprisingly a decent mix of like old school and current tunes, so it wasn't complete shit. Apart from when I went on my birthday recently, and it was a full drum and bass night. That was awful. But anyway, now not everyone in the World of Warcraft audience is familiar with the mechanics and objectives of nightclub gameplay. So I'll explain it in MMO terms because it's entirely relevant to what I'm talking about. I think so anyway. So, you went nightclubbing for loot. And I mean epic loot. Your loot was getting laid, or at least getting securing a successful snog on the dance floor.
No, he's a true WoW player. He goes outside.
Intoxicated enough to believe you were considerably more attractive than you actually were. And I still haven't beaten my personal record of 3 epic loot drops in one nightclub session on one dance floor. And honestly, don't intend to, because that was fucking despicable. But the point is, you prepared yourself for the environment. You trained in the gym, like leveling up your character to improve your stats. You equipped the best gear and haircut, like farming proper armor sets. You got the best aftershave, like optimizing your weapons and enchants. Then you entered the social environment.
That couldn't be me.
And repeatedly failed. Embarrassed yourself and got rejected until eventually you learned how to actually play the fucking game.
Yeah, he's based.
And this is kind of my issue with modern MMOs, especially retail WoW. World of Warcraft does not need to give players a training bra for every single interaction. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes you get kicked from groups. Sometimes somebody flames you because you accidentally body pulled half the dungeon while eating a pack of mini cheddars. That's multiplayer gaming. And honestly, developing a slightly thicker skin is part of learning how online social environments work in the first place. I mean, these days, even Mario Kart now has steering assist. I'm sorry, but isn't that game supposed to be
It defeats
a
the
driving
purpose.
game? How are you going to learn a driving game if the game steers for you? I don't care that if it's for young children. Young kids should be outside throwing mud at each other and beating each other up with sticks. I mean, that's what I did, all right? I used my imagination to pretend I was in Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. Weirdly, my mate from the back street, right, he had these, like, recurring nightmares about these monsters, and he would write short stories about them. I don't know whether his therapist recommended him to do that or something. But anyway, we would imagine ourselves in his stories, okay? We looked like very neurodivergent children running around on the back street in our dressing gowns with our sticks that had been carved into swords, but at least we weren't pussies using steering assist.
Man, this guy. No, he's going at it.
Oh, God.
He's a real one. But what is he doing? A quick break. Vic, he's almost like you.
Edition. Right. You know, if someone is genuinely too socially anxious to interact with did a Jonathan Ross, real players in the multiple game, then I sympathise with that. But honestly, I don't think developers should completely redesign the genre, you know, around removing social friction altogether to pander to people who don't like MMOs. MMOs were originally built around time investment, social dependency, and long-term progression. Those systems are the genre, and when you systematically design them away in favour of excessive accessibility, that's a bit of a tongue twister, instant gratification, and hyper-convenient solo systems, eventually you stop changing just the game and start changing what the genre fundamentally is.
Also, it changes your brain patterns, and it was literally proven by numerous like psychologists and it's like science. We already know so much about it. There's a reason why every big company out there utilize a crew of psychologists to just make sure their games or their products are the most addictive things ever. I mean, I do agree. People need to learn self-control, but it's both. Like, you need both.
Accessibility should open the door, not redesign the entire house. Tutorials are fine, catch-up systems are acceptable. Helping new players learn is obviously healthy for the game, but removing the need for real players to...
Bro, that's so dangerous. How is that dangerous? Like, why putting laws that limit microtransactions are dangerous? Microtransactions didn't even exist back in the day. To give the government much power, what power? You're limiting microtransactions. It doesn't give them any power whatsoever. You're just preventing from people purchasing stuff. Like, I don't really get that point. How is it like giving the government power whatsoever? I'm very much against like giving the government excessive amount of power 100%. But like how limiting microtransaction is like anywhere close to it. I don't really get that point.
Experience endgame dungeons, removing the need to join communities that access core progression, and then adding a one-button rotation macro that partially or entirely automates your class gameplay generally starts lobotomizing the MMO out of World of Warcraft.
Classic WoW.
And yes, before someone in the comments section starts hyperventilating, I know the one-button rotation macro thing in the spellbook isn't technically the mathematically optimal way to maximize DPS at the highest level of play. Wow. But that completely misses the point. The issue is not whether the feature is perfectly competitive, it's that automation slowly makes gameplay feel less personal and less meaningful. The more systems that automate gameplay, the less emotionally connected players feel to their own decisions. MMOs are supposed to reward timing, execution, decision-making, and gradual mastery. When too much of that gets streamlined away for convenience, the gameplay starts feeling emotionally hollow, even if it technically feels smoother and more accessible. MMOs are supposed to feel like worlds you slowly learn over time. Automation, convenience, and acceleration absolutely have their place. But when they're pushed too far into oversimplification, you lose the exact sense of adventure, struggle, and personal growth that made the genre special in the first place. Because when you really think about it, friction and difficulty are behind most of all your fondest MMO memories. So has retail genuinely evolved? Or has it simply transformed into a very polished dopamine distraction machine? One aspect of World of Warcraft that I think the majority of players would agree on, that Blizzard is a little bit lost on what to do, is the story and the world building of the franchise. Now, I already know there's going to be those illiterate fucks in the comment section saying, story doesn't matter in an MMO, gameplay is all that matters.
No.
But I honestly think people massively underestimate how much the world and the narrative and MMO subconsciously affects their attachment.
Thank you. Oh my god, thank you. Oh, this is what I say literally every time some random retail nerd is telling me, oh, story doesn't matter. Like, dog, you realize that you don't have to read every scroll of text to understand the story? A good story will tell itself subconsciously. You'll see it through the world, you walk through the zones, you meet with NPCs, you see the people. That's how you get a good story. That's how you tell it, because the lead character isn't you, it's the world. And when the lead character is the world, you're bound to understand a thing or two about it, even if you don't read anything. I mean, how many of you actually read vanilla WoW quests? I bet nobody. I bet like 80% of people didn't read those. Like, I know, I'm one of them, right? But why do I know every single thing about World of Warcraft all the way until BFA? Okay, BFA I literally just stopped listening, but all the way up until BFA... No, actually, Warlords of Draenor, I do not know the story really that good. So, all the way up to Draenor, I know the story like the back of my hand, okay? Well, now, I've forgotten some things because I am really old, but I do know the story. I remember all of the important parts. And the reason I know that is because you develop a culture around the game, and you hear stories from people like... You're just going to a dungeon with someone and he's like, oh, you know, this place is like this because of this happened and that happened and there was a troll tribe here. And it's like, oh, cool, I didn't know that. And you start learning and maybe you start digging into it and maybe you have a chat about it. And that's how you learn. It happens vicariously through other people and other media. I mean, how many of you encountered Nixium videos? How many of you encountered all of these YouTubers that speak about the story in such a great way? I forgot how it's called. Noble. Like noble videos. I've encountered these videos, and I wasn't a huge lore nerd as well. But World of Warcraft turned me into one. So yeah, story does take such a massive role inside of an MMORPG. Even if you don't really read it. But unfortunately nowadays, Blizzard writing is like, oh, I am the villain. You have to kill me. Okay, why do you do bad stuff, Zealotif? I don't know. Maybe I'll tell you later.
Do you notice this a lot when you
And
play
that's it.
something like New World, where, you know, that has the whole bare bones, the player creates the story approach, when there's a more of an sandboxy MMO, you know, they often end up feeling very emotionally flat and about as interesting as a Tesla driver's personality. Actually, no, I take that back. I generally don't think it's possible to create a fictional universe more boring than the average Tesla owner's entire existence. Even players who skip every quest are still absorbing the atmosphere of the world without realizing it. The faction identity of giant evil green orcs fighting noble blue and gold alliance knights.
Insane.
The mythology of factions like the Defiance Brotherhood,
Insane.
the Scarlet Crusade, and the Burning Legion. All that stuff gives emotional weight to what you're actually doing. You're not just
Absolutely.
killing meaningless enemies or generic zombies or skeletons like you are in New World. Defeating characters like the Lich King, Deathwing, Illidan Stormrage, and even Garrosh Hellscream felt fucking legendary because narrative gives gameplay emotional context even when you think you're ignoring it. Story in MMOs is like an invisible bedrock underneath the world. When it's done well, players don't even consciously notice it affecting them because it's woven directly into the atmosphere, locations, enemies, and progression of the adventure itself. That's why classic WoW zones still feel memorable to people like 20 years later. The world itself felt believable enough for your brain to, emotionally buy into it. Unfortunately, there's a massive problem when an MMO keeps releasing expansions for 20 years straight. Eventually, every new villain has to somehow be bigger, stronger, and more universe-destroying than the last one.
And that's why World of Warcraft should have died with Wrath of the Lich King. World of Warcraft shouldn't have... Like, Cataclysm shouldn't have happened. And I'm saying this in every single video. It's getting kind of tiring at this point. World of Warcraft should have either Cataclysm been, like, thousands of years into the future, or maybe we make World of Warcraft 2. If we have made World of Warcraft 2, that would have been great. And I think they kind of worked on it. I think it was Project Titan, and it ended up failing and becoming Overwatch. But, yeah, regardless, WoW died with Wrath of the Lich King. Or maybe, like, you could have made one expansion to kind of tidy things up, but Cataclysm shouldn't have happened the way that it had.
And honestly, this escalation...
Let's make WoW 2.
Deathwing.
We made it. Blizzard took it away. It existed. It was called Turtle WoW.
This giant lava dragon literally erupted out of the planet and shattered the world. He literally put a dent in Stormwind and split the Barrens in half and flooded entire zones. The apocalypse basically happened. Once you've reached that point narratively, where exactly do you go next? This is how the writers of WoW expansions brainstorm the story for their expansions. Here's a badass dude who is the most powerful badass dude in the universe, and he's going to destroy the world and you have to defeat him. But wait, next expansion comes along. There's an even more powerful badass dude, and he is down here. He's even deeper under the ground. He's the most powerful old god that was underneath the previous most powerful old god this whole fucking time. Oh, fucking shock horror. And if it's not that, it's 1 minute you've got this world that has the most powerful enemies coming to destroy Azeroth. But wait, next expansion comes along, and there's another world that was even further away, even higher up in a different dimension that's even more powerful. And it just simply becomes exhausting.
Yeah, eventually we're gonna reach the final boss, which is just Blizzard current CEO or VP. We're just gonna fight Holly, and it's gonna be in the the arena is going to be the HR department, and you'll never be able to win because the Council of Karens would have like infinite DPS.
Silly, to be honest. All stories need a natural ending eventually. Now, honestly, I think WoW's overarching narrative probably needed to a long time ago. Tolkien actually started writing a direct sequel to The Lord of the Rings set in Middle-earth after the main story ended. but eventually abandoned it because he realised that the story just had already reached its natural conclusion, and continuing it would weaken the original Lord of the Rings. Everything about it, the whole story, the whole ending. And I think there's some wisdom in that. There's a reason long-running stories often reset themselves. It's why Ash Ketchum constantly moved into new regions with new Pokemon teams instead of endlessly escalating into Mega Galactic God Pikachu destroys the multiverse, okay? And every time he went to a new region, he basically released his Pokemon and started fresh. Sometimes worlds need to refresh themselves before they collapse under the weight of their own stretched out lore. It literally feels like butter spread over too much bread, okay? Because eventually every MMO reaches a point where escalating the danger any further starts feeling artificial, predictable, and emotionally weightless. It becomes escalation purely for the sake of escalation. And honestly, I think WoW probably hit that wall roundabout World of Warcraft Legion, to be honest. Sargeras was arguably the final truly established ultimate villain in Warcraft lore from the original games, the gigantic cosmic threat that had been built up for actual years across the franchise, and defeating him generally felt like the climax of WoW's overarching narrative.
No, but you still had the Legion thing going on, which originally it's like the worst primeval, right? So you did need to tie up some loose end with Legion, but again, Legion expansion didn't even do that. It only left more room for questions. So it's like, it's so dumb. We never have closure with anything whatsoever anymore because Blizzard are constantly preparing the new expansion. It's like, oh, okay, we have this. Okay, BFA, Alliance versus Horde again. Okay, cool. We got something out of it? No, nothing. All we did was push turtles into the water. We didn't get anything. Shadowlands, the Jailer. It's literally, like, Shadowlands could have been its own standalone expansion, and you could have played it, you could have skip it, it wouldn't even matter. Like, nothing happened. That's why they constantly went back and retconned it like 5 times already. Because it's so useless. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. They just made an expansion for the sake of making an expansion. It didn't really change anything. Same with Dragonflight. Like, what did Dragonflight did for the story? Absolutely nothing, except making me cringe and want to hurl. It did absolutely nothing. Now I'm playing, not a War Within, I kind of skipped that one, but now I'm playing Midnight. I still don't get the story. It still doesn't make sense. We just have a new villain, over an overarching expansion. So instead of getting one expansion with one big bad, we're getting 3. It didn't really change the formula. It really didn't do anything. It's the same rehashed garbage over and over again. And I bet that the Last Titan, which is supposed to be the next expansion, wouldn't be the finale for World of Warcraft. There's just going to be another big bad, another, oh, Azeroth needs your assistance, champion. And we're just going to go through this cycle over and over again. It's just sad. Big disagree, not everything needs an end. It's just WoW rushed to levels so absurd everything else became irrelevant. You're kind of right about that, but I think that things need to end. They need to end. I think World of Warcraft, like, the entire world shouldn't have ended, but the entire arc that we were currently experiencing should have, right? After Wrath of the Lich King, again, like, go thousands of years into the future, I think that would have done wonders for the game. It just, yeah, Villain of the Week, exactly. Yeah, how many bosses in these MMOs are the big evil guys actually good, but he's just corrupted by evil magic? Well, World of Warcraft has several. They clearly love their Sylvanas. Now, I don't know why, but they clearly do.
In my personal opinion, that was basically what...
Of course, they're not going to end World of Warcraft. It's their biggest moneymaker. Yeah, now you delve into the of the answer of, hey, this is why we're truly not ending the game. We need more microtransactions. We need more $75 treehouse.
The story of World of Warcraft ended. But MMOs are never really allowed to end because their entire business model depends on perpetual expansion releases. So eventually we end up with this endless conveyor belt of increasingly absurd cosmic threats, resurrected characters who should have stayed dead because they died, and their death was meaningful and impactful because they died. Time travel nonsense, alternative universes, and constant retcons trying to artificially keep the stakes escalating forever. And it's not even necessary because... I'm not trying to say that Blizzard writers are untalented or because the individual stories themselves are bad.
You should. They're extremely untalented bunch of wine mom Karens and Labubu millennials. They have no talent whatsoever. They would never be on Tolkien's level because they've never experienced any adversity in their life. And now they feel bad about living in a gated community their entire livelihood. And now they make our stories bad and they screw me. So I don't really understand, like, why wouldn't he call them out? They should have been called out a long time ago. A long time ago.
Bad. The real problem is that escalation without resolution slowly erodes that feeling that anything actually matters anymore. And honestly, I think this is another major reason why, many veteran players just simply stop caring about WoW's narrative altogether. People just don't emotionally connect with it in the same way anymore because there's no longer a singular iconic villain on the box art a lot of the time that instantly makes the expansion feel exciting.
Also, for the love of actual God, like, what is the point of making elves look like humans? I really don't get that. She just looked like a human with pointy ears and eyebrows. What's the point? Where's the definitive features? Where's the thing that differentiate elves from humans? Why they all look the same now? And it's even more clear inside of the game. It's more apparent there. It's just, like, what is that? What is that? Why would you ever do that? Like, what are we gonna do? Make gnomes look like human too? Can't I yeet a gnome into a river anymore without feeling bad about it?
That instantly makes the expansion feel exciting. Ironically, a lot of players probably feel more emotionally invested in killing the Defias Brotherhood in Classic WoW than fighting another cosmic god hidden underneath reality itself or whatever shit they come up with. Smaller stakes often feel more believable and emotionally grounded than the universe is ending again, part 9. The Marvel franchise has the exact same issue. You're sitting here because you keep interrupting my...
And most of the MCU writers, I bet they work for Blizzard. Or either they learn from them or something like that. Because no way that Blizzard employees don't take courses from, like, MCU writers. It's the same type of humor. We recently reacted to, like, Holly, just cringe Classic Plus fake announcement. It was so cringe. Like, ooh, he's right behind me, isn't he? Like, oh my god, that humor is so garbage, dumpster tier. I really wish we could get away from it. And don't get me wrong, it has its place. It's just not inside of World of Warcraft.
Recording by chewing your bone. Okay, you're going to sit my knee and behave.
Yeah, this video does have a lot of fillers, though. Anyway, I will say that. What is the
actual solution to this problem? Because I generally think Blizzard are trapped. The play base just isn't attached to the game. Don't hit the mic. They're attached to their personal history with the game. You can't exactly just shut down the servers tomorrow and announce, right, lads, that's it. World of Warcraft 2 begins now without psychologically devastating several thousand cat girls. And to be fair to Blizzard, despite all these issues, WoW is still the dominant MMO franchise on Earth. It's basically the only MMO that normal people have actually heard of. When I tell people I make videos about World of Warcraft, they absolutely think I'm a socially malfunctioning loser who should probably acquire proper employment. That's fair. But at least they know what World of Warcraft is, okay? If I told people I made Final Fantasy XIV videos instead, they'd probably quietly tell me to go home. Just fucking go home. Don't go out in public.
Or they would put you in a mental institution, like you can never tell.
And remain at least 300 meters away from educational facilities. Now, the recent Jeff Kaplan interview is interesting because it explains a lot about why modern Blizzard can feel so creatively confused. Jeff basically described being pressured from above with financial targets. This idea of, like, make this amount of money by this date or 1,000 people are going to lose their jobs. And that's what seriously, would you stop messing with the mic? Go on there. Okay?
He just yeeted a dog.
And basically, it was like, right, 1,000 people are going to lose their jobs, and that's on you. And apparently, one of the comparisons being made by the chief financial officer was, if Fortnite can make this much money, why can't you do it with Overwatch? And honestly, that one sentence explains so much about what feels wrong with modern gaming. Because Blizzard didn't become Blizzard by asking, how do we copy-paste the most profitable thing on Earth right now? They became Blizzard by making games with such a strong identity that the money followed afterwards. Warcraft, Diablo, StarCraft, Overwatch, these weren't successful because they were desperately chasing someone else's monetization model.
They were innovative.
They were successful because they felt distinct, okay? And this is where financial thinking can become creatively poisonous to developers in video games. Obviously, companies need to make money. I'm not the average Green Party voter, but there's a massive difference between making money because you created something meaningful or slowly redesigning your creative identity around whatever business model currently prints the most cash. Just because Fortnite can monetize in a certain way does not mean Overwatch should start thinking like Fortnite. And I've always found this ironic, okay, because the CFO's job is optimization, reduce risk, increase growth, maximize revenue per user, okay? But some of the greatest games ever made came from doing the absolute opposite, taking creative risks, building weird systems, trusting a niche identity and allowing friction and imperfection to exist. You don't create something special by focus grouping it against quarterly revenue projections. MMOs used to feel like digital worlds designed by nerds obsessed with fantasy and sci-fi universes, and now sometimes they can feel like behavioral science products designed by analysts obsessed with retention curves in order to obviously optimize consistent revenue.
Of course, because you swapped passionate developers for guy in suits. Guy in suits, they don't even understand what is a video game on a very basic level. All they care about is retention and see a graph that infinitely goes up, which is impossible long term, but nobody cares. And that's why I constantly say that Blizzard are like completely myopic. They can't see anything beyond their next quarterly update, and there's nothing you can do about it, honestly. It's insane. The change needs to happen from within. It just needs to happen to the top guys. And once the top guys become like gamers, like they used to be in Blizzard back in the good old days, that's when you start seeing meaningful change inside of video games and World of Warcraft.
WoW genuinely feels like a universe desperately trying to outrun its own ending at this point. And honestly, I think most MMO developers should probably just accept that these games naturally have a lifespan. You get 10 good, strong years. You enjoy those years, and you have to creatively refresh the world instead of endlessly inflating it until the whole thing collapses. Another massive issue Blizzard have created is how aggressively they make previous expansions irrelevant. You can literally walk into old raids now and one-shot characters like Deathwing or the Lich King, who once presented themselves as a world-ending apocalyptic threat. It feels ridiculous, but WoW's player base has become completely conditioned around this endless raid-to-raid tier progression structure that every new patch invalidates the previous one because there always needs to be a new raid dropping stronger gear. I know Time Walking has kind of done something about that, and obviously the newest raid should always contain the best rewards and the most difficult encounters. That part makes sense, but there are now 54 raids in the game. 54 raids. Damn. And realistically, players only are going to actively progress in the newest 1 to 2 raids at any given time. The rest of the game's endgame, historically, it effectively just becomes an abandoned museum. At least older zones still serve a purpose through leveling. They kept them relevant. You can level up to endgame leveling in whatever zone you want. That's really cool. Exploration and nostalgia are really a good thing. But I've never really understood why entire expansions have to become mechanically irrelevant in WoW when other MMOs do such a better job at preserving older content and keeping it a meaningful part of the ongoing game world.
Because Blizzard is lazy. It's that simple. They would never go the FF14 route of making older content viable. They would never do that. Instead, they're like, I just blaze through it. It's an old toy. Just throw it. Who cares? No, they would never do that. Like, never. Just because they're so lazy and incompetent. Like, that is the literal reason why. I mean, other games have done it. Of course Blizzard can do it. But they couldn't even bother to make a coherent leveling experience. That's why they made Chromie Time. You literally go to a past expansion that the new player won't even have any context whatsoever about, and you're like, just choose one, like, who cares? Just reach the shiny new endgame. And that's it. It's the dumbest thing in the world. They should make it exactly like FF14, where you start from the very bottom, you go through every single thing in the path to achieve the latest expansion. You read all the story, you do all the stuff, at least the main stuff that are very important and crucial to the lore, and you only have to do it one per account. Yeah, like, that's it. But they would never do that. Yeah, and Chromie Time is also bugged. I know, it's also bugged. And not only that, if you hit max level inside of Chromie Time and you didn't finish the current expansion, you get yeeted out of it. So even if you did somewhat understood the story, you were like, okay, I really want to finish that expansion. Chromie's like, no, kid, yeet! And that's it. You're just screwed. You have to play Midnight now.
Blizzard do actually seem fully aware of these narrative problems as well. They're very clearly marketing the World of Warcraft The Last Titan as the culmination of the last 20 years of Warcraft storytelling.
Of course.
Returning to Northrend, revisiting the Titans, and supposedly uncovering the truth behind Azeroth itself.
Yes.
Kind of sounds cool, to be honest. But even if that expansion ends up...
The truth is that there is a second Azeroth, like the second Krusty Krab. It's like Mr. Krab made another one, like Krusty Krab 2, and you're gonna have Azeroth 2. Why? Money!
being incredible, it still raises the uncomfortable question. Where the fuck do you go after that? Honestly, it can't go anywhere after that. Because eventually, Blizzard are going to have to decide whether they actually have the balls to soft reset the game in some way. Honestly, one thing I genuinely respect about Final Fantasy XIV is they actually did that. They were willing to completely destroy the original world as a real live event that happened in the game, and they relaunched it with the Final Fantasy XIV
It needed to happen.
That. You know, that took confidence. Blizzard probably need to do something even more dramatic than that, to be honest. A huge part of what makes a fresh MMO exciting is that the world can still feel understandable. The scale is smaller, the conflicts are easier to emotionally grasp, and players can mentally process what the fuck is actually going on. But if a completely new WoW player tries WoW today, they're immediately bombarded with 20 years of lore, 70 important characters, 17 dimensions, giant cosmic gods, dragon politics, and enough storylines to require a forensic investigation board with red string connecting everything fucking together. WoW genuinely doesn't feel coherent anymore unless you're already deeply invested in Warcraft lore. Existing players can navigate all the layers of history because they grew up with it. But for new players, it often just feels overwhelming and emotionally inaccessible. And if new players can't meaningfully connect with the world, then eventually that game stops truly growing. It instead just endlessly recycles the same aging audience over and over again. What is WoW realistically going to look like in another 10 years? And honestly, I don't mean that in a pessimistic way. It probably will still exist. It's probably still going to have a decent player base, because somehow
In reality, I think it's going to be a mobile game. I think right now Blizzard are going through the process of simplifying the game mechanics to a point where it can be played on mobile, just like they did with Overwatch. I think that is realistically what's going to happen with World of Warcraft, and it saddens me deeply to say that, but I truly think that this is what's going to happen. Other than Classic Plus, I don't see any hope for that game whatsoever.
The MMO has managed to take the reins of the dominant MMO.
Yeah,
WoW
Classic Plus is my only hope.
It's like a giant, fat, unkillable whale of a game at this point. It has dominated the MMO genre for over 2 decades, and despite everything constantly declaring, everybody constantly declaring it dead every 3 years, like, I'm not really doing that in this video, but, this is a big criticism of the game. Despite me spending this long criticizing the game, Blizzard still can release old versions of their game for the 3rd time in a row and somehow pull in bigger numbers than most modern MMOs can even dream of on a launch day. And yes, before somebody starts, angrily typing with anime profile pictures, I know people are going to say Final Fantasy XIV is equally as popular, but fuck off. No, it isn't. Just isn't.
Wait, what?
Fantasy XIV is equally as popular, but fuck off, no way.
It was at a certain point when Asmongold made his exodus from World of Warcraft to Final Fantasy, but it fell immediately flat after that. Final Fantasy XIV, I played it for 6 months, was the best 6 months of my life, but unfortunately it would never hold a candle to World of Warcraft due to how old the engine is. It's such a trash engine. They need to burn it and build a new one. And I do understand like the historical context of it. I do understand that Yoshi P built it from scratch and he had very limited time and resources to do so. I completely respect that. But before Dawntrail, they should have upgraded to a new one, especially with all the money they got from the surgence of new players. I don't know why they chose to stick with the same old engine. It looks garbage. It moves garbage. You can still play FF14 on PS3. This should never be a case for an MMO in 2026. Never.
Just isn't. Okay? And this does raise an uncomfortable possibility. Maybe WoW isn't actually that lost. Maybe Blizzard adapted about as well as they could realistically to a changing audience, maintained their player base better than almost any other MMO developer on Earth, and maybe players just simply don't care about MMOs as much as they used to.
They do.
Maybe WoW didn't lose its magic. Maybe we lost our obsession with the era that created it. Because WoW released during a genuinely unique cultural moment in gaming history, back then, online multiplayer gaming itself still felt exciting and futuristic. A lot of people generally didn't have proper internet access when World of Warcraft released, never mind, constant online gaming like we do today. In 2004, my family didn't even have internet. Okay, and that honestly wasn't very unusual at all for like a British working class family back then. My mum was a dinner lady and my stepdad was a mechanic. These weren't people who were rushing out to buy the newest technology the second it released. And when we finally did get internet, loading a single picture of Emma Watson from Harry Potter and Prisoner of Azkaban took nearly 6 working days. But because me and every other teenage boy in Britain was catastrophically in love with Hermione Granger, let's be honest, especially me and my friends on the back street. Apart from that, we mostly just used MSN and we played weird browser games like Gangster's Paradise. I don't know if anyone remembers that one. It's honestly a bit of a proto-browser MMO, now that I think about it. MMOs originally...
Guys, early 2000s were peak humanity. I think we really need to go back. Like the 90s, and 90s I can't really advocate for because I was born in the 90s, so I grew up in the 2000s, but I mean, early 2000s, man, like, this was peak humanity. MTV, all of these shows, all of these games, man, they were the best. Yeah, up to 2008. Yeah, I agree. Maybe 2010 was like the major shifting point. We started to get more pop culture involved in everyday lives, and now it's completely took over. It's crazy. Man, these were the good old days. We didn't appreciate them enough.
Offered something that was genuinely revolutionary at the time. Online worlds, large-scale social interaction, exploration, progression, and digital escapism on a scale most games simply couldn't provide. But now you can get fragments of that exact same experience from loads of different games without needing to spend 3 hours murdering 40 zebras for 4 zebra hooves. You don't even exclusively socialize through MMOs anymore. In fact, most players barely socialize inside MMOs at all now because we already, we hang out in stuff like Discord now. And, competitive games now provide prestige and progression systems, so there's that. Survival games offer exploration and world immersion. Matchmaking systems removed a huge amount of the original world dependency MMOs used to rely on. The MMO genre is no longer the exclusive gateway to those experiences, and honestly, I think we probably just need to accept that it's never going to dominate gaming culture in the same way ever again. 13-year-old me could spend 8 hours straight every night, every school night, sneaking up late, leveling a Draenei Paladin, slowly jogging back and forth between Stormguard and Rebel Camp, turning quests in like I was, employed by the medieval postal service or something. I used to sit and actually read books start to finish with 0 issue. Did that all the way through my degree in English literature and creative writing, by the way. Now I can barely sit through a Netflix episode without instinctively checking my phone halfway through. Probably going to be something like Auto Trader. My attention span it's been absolutely carpet bombed by modern internet culture and technology. So if I'm already mentally cooked, which a lot of us are, let's be honest, many people watching this video, imagine the average modern 13-year-old.
Yikes.
Now, I don't know if any of you regularly have to experience the psychologically horror event known as being forced to interact with teenagers at family gatherings, but whenever
Every game, especially MMORPG, should have proximity voice chat. What are you trying to bring hell on earth? I mean, don't get me wrong, that would be the funniest rap I've ever seen in my life, but I don't think that should ever happen.
They basically exist as a partially evolved cyborg.
What are you trying to summon here?
An iPad screen, okay, or their phone. You never actually speak to them. They kind of just sit there silently consuming short-form content at the rate that would probably instantly kill a Victorian child. And I know I sound like a deeply exhausted middle-aged Facebook mum right now, but there genuinely is growing evidence linking excessive exposure to smartphones, short-form content, and constant digital stimulation with differences in attention span, emotional regulation, sleep quality, impulse control, and actually academic performance. Even the British government have started discussing guidelines around, what age children should probably be introduced to smart devices.
You don't need to be that clever and to have like 700 different scientific papers on just for you like to know that constantly having an imbalanced emotional influx is like really bad. You can't like when you scroll through, I don't know, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, any social media form, and you see like a video that makes you happy and immediately you see a video that makes you sad. It's really, really bad. The human mind isn't designed for that. You don't need to be a genius to understand that you shouldn't put your kid in front of like 10 different Cocomelon shows that makes them dumb as hell. Okay? You don't need to know that. Like, you don't need to read 100 of scientific research papers just to understand. Just use your brain. But again, I think millennials should be outlawed. I think they had their time. Like, they should be gone. Same with Gen Zers. Like, we had enough. We need a grown-ups to take charge again.
So my point is, there probably isn't going to be another giant wave of young MMO players enthusiastically logging into a fantasy world to slowly kill 12 boars and read quest text for 6 hours straight. It's not going to happen. And I honestly think this is why partly we're starting to see the rise of softer MMO-style games like Destiny 2, Monster Hunter, Helldivers 2, and that other one, Warframe. They preserve pieces of MMO design. Corporate progression, social gameplay, long-term investment, crafting and repeatable group content, but strip away huge chunks of slower-based friction that define traditional MMOs. And honestly, I think future MMOs are probably going to evolve further in that direction. Imagine something with all the core gameplay systems of WoW. Raids, dungeons, battlegrounds, arenas and social hubs, but without a massive persistent open game world at all. Instead, everyone just hangs out in a giant medieval city like Stormwind, queuing for activities through NPCs and going to a blacksmith to craft their gear, and socializing between, instance content. When you think about it, retail WoW already kind of feels like that. It's World of Lobbycraft anyway. And maybe that's simply what the future of the MMO genre is going to look like. So maybe WoW didn't become lost because Blizzard lost direction. Maybe WoW feels lost because gaming itself evolved beyond that cultural era that originally made MMOs feel magical in the first place.
No, completely disagree. I know you disagree about that as well, Barbara. I just want to quickly mention that, people can definitely play MMOs like they used to back in the day. There's a reason why World of Warcraft was massively successful once again after re-releasing Classic for the third time. There's a reason why people are willing to take a chance on all of the different versions of World of Warcraft, like Season of Discovery and Hardcore. That's because there's a huge market for it. Unfortunately, no new company is ever going to take the risk of creating an MMO because it's too much of a time investment and effort, and if it all goes away, you're just completely bankrupt. So I do understand that, and we're screwed.
Yes, the over-automation, system bloat, and narrative exhaustion absolutely make retail feel less like an MMO than it used to be. But at the same time, what exactly can Blizzard realistically do to preserve a genre whose golden age may have been fundamentally tied to a completely different period of internet culture and gaming psychology?
Make the game
good. Plenty of people
good.
still enjoy retail. Plenty of people still prefer classic. And honestly, Blizzard have been smart enough to realise that there will always be players who prefer the old-school style MMOs, and therefore they will always provide something for those players. Because maybe WoW was never supposed to survive forever as a perfectly preserved time capsule. Maybe no MMO can endlessly escalate its world, simplify its systems, modernise its design, and still perfectly preserve the exact emotional feeling players experienced 20 years ago. When online gaming, it still felt new and exciting back then. But despite all the bloat, all the arguments, all the expansions and all the changes, people still care enough to passionately argue about what World of Warcraft should be. And honestly, that probably says a lot more about the game's legacy than any subscriber number ever could. Because at the end of the day, maybe Blizzard didn't really lose WoW. Maybe we just lost the era of gaming that made MMOs so glorious.
No,
maybe
we
Blizzard
haven't.
Didn't really fail that much. Maybe that's the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this, because let's be honest, everyone just loves to absolutely shit on WoW, okay? Despite every criticism and every WoW is dead video and every expansion controversy, Blizzard still successfully dominated the MMO genre, and still are, for 2 decades. The problem is that World of Warcraft often feels like it's like the best possible version of what an MMO could be. More like what is most commercially sustainable version of an MMO. It's efficient, accessible, constantly alive, and endlessly streamlined, but rarely reaching the full creative potential of what the genre once hinted at. And honestly, I don't think this problem is exclusive to WoW anymore. I think almost every modern MMO suffers from this to the same extent. They survive, they retain players, and they generate revenue, but very few of them still feel genuinely ambitious in the way older MMOs once did. It's like the genre slowly stopped trying to create dangerous immersive virtual worlds and instead became obsessed with optimizing engagement, retention, and convenience. And when it looks like a new MMO is going to do something genuinely quite original and pretty cool, gets cancelled like Ashes of Creation.
What? Did he just try to defend Ashes of Creation there? Okay, that was the first major L in this video. I'm very surprised. What innovation? The innovation was lining Steven Sharif pockets with more money. There wasn't anything innovative about it. It was literally just a bunch of Unreal Engine pre-made assets thrown together inside of a randomized world. There was literally nothing innovative about Ashes of Creation. Yeah, that kind of took me by surprise there. I'm very disappointed. Very disappointed.
Honestly, I think modern MMOs often feel like incredibly polished versions of what the executives think players want and what's going to make the most money, realistically. Rather than bold evolutions of what the
Guild
game
Wars
could have
mentioned.
Not dead, not failures, just strangely safe, diluted, and spiritually smaller than their potential. And maybe that's the real tragedy of the MMO genre. Not that it's collapsed, but that it's settled for mediocrity, while still being successful enough to never truly need reinventing in order to be successful.
Damn. Okay, seems to be the end of the video. God bless, this was a tough one. I already said all that I had to. This video is way too long as it is. Great video still. Gonna leave a link in the description. You guys should watch it for yourself. Give this man a like. I mean, it was really pretty extensive. I will say, the one thing I don't agree with him upon is the doomer take of the entire culture is shifted, so WoW need to shift as well. I think we had solid proof with Vanilla Classic re-releasing again and TBC re-releasing again and being massively popular just completely disproved that point. I think we can easily make an MMO that is as good as World of Warcraft used to be and even better, but we just need competent people to work on it.